Okay, first let's say a few things about my Prius. She's built in early 2010 and she has now 230,000 kilometers on the odometer, give or take. And I bought it with 226 or something like this. And in the first 2,000 kilometers, I noticed that we are burning some oil. So I came to the conclusion that, I needed to do something about it. Loose piston rings are a thing, especially with the early model years of the Prius 3. So I should do something about it. And that's what you're gonna see in this video. You're gonna see how I change my EGR valve, my PCV valve, and I'm gonna talk a bit about the failure mechanism of the whole thing and why it's important to keep these parts clean to keep the longevity of your Prius. This is a very reliable car. It drives perfectly otherwise. Yeah, there are a few other things. Sometimes you get a rough start when you move the car only very little bit and it's quite cold outside and you let it sit overnight. Maybe just move the car a few meters back and then let it sit. And if it's cold outside and then you start in the morning, fuel gases have evaporated from the pistons and gotten into the intake manifold, and then you get a rough idle for a few seconds. So that's nothing really to worry about. Many people say it has something to do with a clogged EGR valve or EGR cooler, but that's actually sometimes not the case. It could also be that you just moved your Prius a little bit while it was cold and then didn't move it again. You're gonna see basically a noob. I don't have that much experience in car repair. This is basically my first real repair job. The whole repair took me about, give or take, I would say 4 days. With a lift, you are stupidly faster. And I also don't have that much experience in car repair. And the Prius is quite a tight car to repair, actually. So let's get into the video. Okay, let's hold on for a minute. Before we start going into the actual repair, let's first go through the failure problematics. I think it's important to understand what's going wrong here actually, to see what the fix is and what we discover. First, in the year 2005-ish, smart Toyota engineers figured out, hey, we're losing a lot of efficiency by the piston ring rubbing against the cylinder wall. And so they developed low tension piston rings. And low tension piston rings means that the piston ring is not pushing that hard out of its groove and onto the cylinder wall, therefore reducing friction. But over time it had a problem, and that's with dirt, so with combustion products getting stuck next to the piston ring in the groove and therefore preventing the piston ring from sliding in and out freely. And what then happens if you have a stuck piston ring and you have a combustion above the piston ring? Air and combustion products move past the piston ring and they break the seal. Also, a bit of oil that's on the wall can now get above the piston, and then it's in the combustion cycle. Grime now gets into the oil of your engine, and there it accumulates. So when you have dirt that accumulates in the oil and also combustion gases in the crankcase, you have two failure paths or two problems. First, let's talk about the dirty oil. The dirty oil is then sprayed throughout the engine, and what it's doing, it's even getting the piston ring more stuck. And if it's more stuck, even more dirt goes in here. And so it's like a circle of death. Eventually a piston ring that would once move freely, like here on the left side, where you can see the piston ring compressing inwards a bit to make room for a little divot in the cylinder wall. Oil would drain out through the drainage holes out of the piston and everything is good. But here on the right side, it's a different story. And that's a story of a low tension piston ring. So we have our low tension piston ring and eventually dirt accumulates behind it, next to it, around it. And then we have a divot, or the piston gets hot and compresses outwards a bit more and the piston ring gets pushed in the piston and it's now solidly plugged with residuals from the combustion. Also now there's no longer an easy path for the oil to return inside the piston because it's plugged. And when we then move or cool down our engine so that the piston shrinks again, the ring is still in there. And we end up with a small gap between the piston ring and the cylinder wall. And this gap gives us the opportunity to exchange gases and oil with the space above the combustion chamber and with the space below the piston, so the crankcase. And we have oil moving up and dirt and combustion gases moving down, because up here where the combustion happens, it's a high pressure environment. So pressure always wants to flow to lower pressure zones, and that's the crankcase. So overall, let's put it together. We have stuck oil rings, or stuck piston rings in general. These decrease the effective lubrication on the cylinder wall, so therefore they increase wear, and also they increase oil burning. So that's one thing you would notice in this case, an increase in oil burning. But as I told you, it's not everything. We had two paths, and the other one is the crankcase and the combustion gas, what's now leaking past our piston. And it looks like this. This is a very crude schematic of an engine. You have your cylinder head up here, you have your cylinder head gasket underneath, then you have your valves, then you have the combustion chamber above the piston and the crankcase below it with the oil sump in the bottom. In here we generally have a low pressure zone. Up here we also have low pressure, and there's one problematic part. Actually, there are multiple parts like this in your engine. I've just highlighted one. And that's the part where your crank, so the power output shaft of your engine, leaves the engine block. And there you have the crankcase seal. The crankcase seal is normally, they are very long lasting, and in a Prius at least don't create that much problems. But under certain circumstances, crankcase seals can develop problems, and that is when they are under high differential pressure. So if the pressure in the crankcase is higher than the pressure outside the crankcase, this is bad. Then you have a set seal. And if the pressure is low, so it's equal to the pressure outside the crankcase, everything is good. That's what you want to reach. That's what you don't want to reach. But when you have gases leaking alongside the pistons into your crankcase, eventually pressure would build up. So, to prevent scenarios like this, where you have a leaking set seal that's not able to deal with the differentials on pressure, and oil and combustion gases moving alongside the crankshaft and everything getting oily and you're losing a lot of engine oil, you don't want this. So engineers came to the rescue and they started the project of the PCV valve for seal happiness. The PCV valve protects the seal from dealing with high differential pressure. And it does it by doing this here. You have crankcase overpressure created by blow-by alongside the pistons. It always happens a bit, there's always a bit of blow-by. And this air with oil and grime that's in it gets directed outside the engine. In cars that were built maybe 40 years ago, you would just have a hose going underneath your car and this air would be ejected there. You can't eject this air into your engine compartment because there's oil in there and then the oil vapor gets everywhere and you don't have a good day and your engine compartment would get really dirty, but not rusty, but really dirty. So they came to the solution to the problem, and that's pollution of the intake air. What do I mean with that? We have our PCV valve in our crankcase and we now pump our dirty oily air into our air intake manifold. So into this here, there's your air filter, and this oily air, it's mostly air, probably it's 99.9% air, but there's a bit of oil inside. And you pump that into your air intake and then it gets combusted and the oil in there even forms more not so soluble combustion products that now also have the opportunity to leak by the pistons and make your oil even dirtier, creating even more blow-by. Also, it can cake up your intake manifold. But that's their solution to dealing with the air of the PCV valve. And now you have your exhaust air. So it's your exhaust, highly enriched in particles of all grime species, and it's quite hot. It moves down your exhaust manifold and then it comes to a split where it can go into your catalytic converter. It's a fancy metal or ceramic grid and it can convert unburned hydrocarbons to burned hydrocarbons if there's enough temperature. So you blow your exhaust through there, it gets even hotter, it burns again basically, but you get only CO2 and a bit of other nasty gases out, but no longer bigger particles. They all are burning in here. That's why you don't see white smoke when your Prius burns oil. With older cars you see white smoke, it's a direct indication of the car burning oil, and with newer cars you rarely see this. Because the catalytic converter can convert also oil, because it's a hydrocarbon, it can be burned in there, even if it's not burned directly in the combustion process. But your air has another part, and that's probably to the most dreaded part of the Prius 3 in general. It's the EGR cooler and EGR valve assembly. What's happening here? So you have your EGR cooler, and that is taking hot exhaust gas, cooling it down, creating hot water that's flowing through the EGR cooler and cooling that in your main radiator. And then you blow colder exhaust gas past the EGR valve. The EGR valve is there so that you can shut off this flow or regulate it fairly finely. And then our cold EGR exhaust gas can also flow right into the intake manifold. It also carries some soot particles. They would move freely through the intake manifold, but unfortunately you pump PCV valve air inside there, so crankcase air with a bit of oil. And now you have soot particles from your EGR valve that can get stuck to the oil that is coming from your PCV valve, so from your crankcase. And that's not so good. You're gonna see a bit of that in the video. But there's another problem right here. And with time, oil particles even get into the EGR cooler and they clog it up. So it's a sooty, grimy mixture in there. It may look dry to the touch, but it's a bit grimy. And the failure happens here in two parts. First, probably your EGR valve, because it has way smaller channels, gets clogged with oil and dirt, and it then probably no longer closes. So you always have exhaust gas leaking through here. It's not the biggest problem. Eventually though, your EGR cooler gets plugged, and when that's plugged, there's no longer air moving through here, or very little air. And that creates a special problem. So when your engine is cold, it has a harder time sustaining combustion precisely anyway. So a cold engine with an engine ECU, so an engine control unit, that orders now air from the EGR valve is not getting air from the EGR valve because that's obstructed. So you end up with an air-fuel ratio that's not correct. And then you end up with imprecise combustions. And these result in the famous Prius rattle that you probably noticed, and then you looked up this video here. And the Prius rattle is very bad. You can experience lots of failures through there. For example, it's a lot of stress on the head gasket because there are unexpected spikes in combustion pressure, and also your ice and generator clutch, there are springs in there. They get stressed a lot, they can break, and also I've seen engine mounts that are broken online due to the Prius rattle. So when this happens and there's not enough exhaust air coming through the EGR channel, and your throttle body flap is closed because your engine wants to suck air through the EGR assembly, you end up with a significant problem, and that is that you have now an underpressure in here and normal atmospheric pressure in your crankcase, and that opens your PCV valve. So you now suck in lots of air through the PCV valve, and this air here, it's filled with an oil dust or oil spray. So you suck in even more oil into your combustion chamber and burn it. So you're losing oil this way by sucking it up, just because your EGR cooler and EGR valve assembly is clogged, and your PCV valve requests air from your EGR valve. This is also why it's not recommended to just close this up. Back in the day, people would just close the EGR valve and say, yeah, it's only for environmental reasons, which it is. And they close it up, and then it's gone. But when you have your PCV valve connected to it and you close it up, first, your ECU is not programmed to deal with this. And also, you now suck in great amounts of air from your crankcase, and this creates even more oil in your combustion cycle that should not belong there, and that then gets burned. And this is very bad, and it's like a circle of failure. Let's return to the middle of the whole document, and there I have the circle of failure for you. You have dirty oil because you didn't have regular oil change intervals, for example. And you end up with stuck piston rings. First they are slightly stuck maybe, and then you have an increase in crankcase pressure that affects your PCV valve and puts lots of strain on it. So there's lots of oil vapor and dirt and grime going through there and clogging that up. So it's no longer closing correctly, and you have an oily exhaust because all the oil from the engine that gets pushed through the PCV valve now ends in your combustion chamber, and then some of the oil survives the combustion and then ends up in the EGR. And with that, your EGR assembly clogs, you have greater differential pressure, and you basically increased your rate of oil burning or oil consumption. In my Prius, the oil consumption rate is about, I'd say, 0.8 liters per 1,000 kilometers. So we are probably somewhere in phase 2 of stuck rings. I reduced it by cleaning my EGR, but still there's probably air leaking past the pistons in a bigger amount than expected and blowing through my PCV valve and increasing oily exhaust and oil burning that way. And even if I cleaned my EGR valve, it's still a problem. And one should fix the stuck rings, but that's a very annoying fix to do. But you're gonna see me doing the change of the PCV valve, so exchanging that for a brand new one, and then cleaning my EGR valve and my EGR cooler. So it turns out that the European version Prius is a little bit different. The windscreen has not the shape as the American version does. Also, the wiper assembly is completely in the lower part. There's nothing sticking up here. It's all underneath the windshield cowling. Yeah, you pick that up by wedging a screwdriver underneath the end cap here. Put it like right here and wiggle your screwdriver around. Eventually the end cap's gonna come off. You remove both of the windshield wipers by wiggling them to get them from this nut. Before you need to, of course, remove the M14 that's on top of there. Yeah, close the hood and wiggle the windshield wiper while you put it in the up position and pull a bit up, and eventually it's gonna release. You need a little bit of force, but not too much. Otherwise, there are clips in this, and this location. You can push them in with a screwdriver from the top. It's like a flap, and you push that flap inwards, and then you can pull it basically. You can pull the flap up a bit, and then you feel it release. Also, there are two push pins right here, and one is over there. And these are these kinds of push pins right here. And when you hold them from the top, hold the ring part and push with your fingers from underneath, you can get them to release also very easily. Okay, now we're gonna remove this cable harness from the windshield wiper assembly. Therefore, you unplug it. I'm gonna do that later with two hands. And you also push up this white cable harness holder thing. You can do that fairly easy from underneath and then just pull it up. It's formed like this. Unplugging this connector is fairly easy. You just push in on this tab, push it hard and wiggle, and then you're gonna get it out. Next step, I've just removed this bolt over here, and now I'm gonna remove this one. These have very wide washers. Yeah. Okay, so to remove the wiper assembly after you've just unbolted the two bolts, there is this rubber nipple thing, and that grabs into this thing back here, and you can pull it out basically to the passenger side. Next step is removing the engine cover, and you do that by just grabbing or putting your hand underneath and then pulling up, and do the same thing right over here. Okay, next in line there are these things. These are like flaps to partition these compartments, and they have a small clip on the end. You can unclip it from this side, and then you can push over the compartment. And now we're gonna remove the metal tray, the catch tray for the water. Okay, from here on you have a clear view to your engine. You have your plug packs over here, you have your EGR there with the EGR cooler behind it. You have your air box right here, intake is here. So depending on what you want to do, now you play the game of see a screw, remove a screw, I think. And personally, I have started with this part of the airbox. I unclip this. There's like a clip behind here. You push it down, then you can pull it. Get the hose out from this clamp. And now I'm gonna remove this because I want to get to my intake manifold, and everything that's in the way needs to go. Okay, see a screw, remove a screw works in the following way. I've now taken the grounding from the engine block. It's a very small screw. It's this one. I put it back in its place. I can't get this clip to unleash, so yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. Then I needed to unbolt the water bottle on 2 locations. One is here, one is there. The screws for that are like the small screws. A bit longer and black than the ones used for the metal engine, for the metal cowling that was going over there. Yeah, you need to remove a screw way down there to unscrew this grounding lug. Yeah, I did that with a tape over the wrench, or over the nut from the wrench. After that, I've removed this screw. This was one of those black ones here. There was another black one, and that was sitting over there, right next to the stud. And then I removed this one, and that is one of the shinier ones, one of these. After this, I could move this part now freely, and I've now untightened 2 screws right here, and also the air filter assembly. There's another screw right here, where I think with that you can sort of remove the airbox assembly then. Let's see if that's the case. Okay, I have now successfully removed this part, the airbox assembly, from here. You need to wiggle it a bit, but it's totally doable. Down here, what you can see down here, that's your water pump. You have access to it now, quite good actually. Then you have your throttle, your air restriction assembly down here, and your intake manifold up here. Yes, back there's the EGR. It's where we want to get to, and here you have the hybrid inverter. So if you remember this small grounding wire, it's located right here, and it's located like this. You can see it, the hole, and the push pins for it are on the back side, one from the top and one from the bottom. So in theory, I think you could reach in from the back with pliers and like squeeze it like this, and with that remove this hose, this wire. And now I'm gonna reinstall the wire to not have it flying around here or laying around here. So I have removed the throttle body assembly, or this thing, and I've sort of found my problem. As you can see, my Prius isn't only filtered through its grade paper air filter over there, but we also have an oil bath at the bottom of our intake manifold. And why does that happen? So, your EGR valve is clogged, and normally your engine draws exhaust gas when it's at low power, in a low power state. But when it's not, this flap opens and you're all golden. You can pull fresh air, everything is good. Now you're at a low power state and your EGR cooler assembly back there, probably clogged, probably never been changed. 230,000 kilometers on this car. Yeah, probably the first one, I guess. And now you're pulling a vacuum in your intake manifold. And that goes okay for quite some time, but eventually there's one part where your engine can still draw new air, and that's through the crankcase ventilation. So you always have a bit of blow-by next to the pistons. So you need a way that overpressure can leave your engine. And that happens through the PCV valve. And this one ends right down here. So you're pulling a vacuum. Now the pressure in the crankcase, it's in comparison to the vacuum in your intake manifold is way greater. Your PCV valve opens, or maybe is stuck open a bit. And what do? You pull oil into your intake manifold. And then you wonder, when you fill up your car with oil, you fill it up right to the upper dot on your dipstick, and you drive 200 kilometers, 300 kilometers, and you look at it again, and maybe 30% is gone, and you think, what the fuck? And then nothing ever happens after this. For the next 1,000 kilometers, you maybe lose 5-10% or something. And that's because there's way more splash when the oil level is a bit higher. So more oil gets sucked into your PCV valve, through your PCV valve, and basically stays in your intake manifold and gets burned. Why don't you see smoke? You have your Prius 3 is equipped with a great catalytic converter, and that one burns up all the oil smoke. So you think, oh yeah, everything is great. But really, you're filtering your intake air through another oil bath. And it's actually not so great. So we're gonna change the PCV valve, and we're gonna clean the EGR cooler. Yeah, and also clean the intake manifold. Because somewhere in that tract there's a problem, and we're gonna find that. And some obstruction. In the next step, I have removed this hose down there. That's some kind of vacuum line. And I have removed this hose back here. There's a clamp on it. On the lower one, there isn't. For removing them, I've just put the throttle body or the flap assembly back over there. Yeah. Next in line is removing the intake manifold bolts. Wait, short intermission right here. I need to tell you about the annoying cable harness. And that's the one that you see on the screen right now, marked in red. I struggled at least 30 minutes removing that fucker. I tried removing the lid, and let me tell you, that doesn't help. Underneath the cable harness there are unreachable clips that you can't reach, and you need to pry them up. I did that with 2 screwdrivers that I wiggled in from the side, and then wiggled it more and twisted the screwdrivers a bit. Try to find white flathead screwdrivers. A whole schematic looks like this, and yeah, you need to force the clip up. The clip survives this a few times. Eventually it will break, but for a few times it's okay, and you shouldn't get in there like more than a few times in the life of the car, I think. And that's the end of the intermission. So happy fixing. There are 2 ones that are on a stud. It's this and this one, and all the others are not like, they are normal bolts, and they are all M12. And I've recommended, or I've seen a video of a guy that recommended removing first the outer ones, then the inner ones, and then a center one, or at least loosening them in this order. Following problem, my ports are plugged, quite solid, and now I have cleaned them. So this surface, I've degreased it, cleaned it quite well. I've put a tape on top of it on 3 of the 4 ports, and now I'm gonna blow compressed air in here and hope that everything comes out. Let's see if that's working. So this is a few hours later into my disassembly of my Prius 3 European version. It's, by the way, built in 2010. And I have now changed my PCV valve, PC crankcase ventilation valve thing. This one. Changed it against another one. If you shake it, you can hear it wiggle. This one feels a bit muffled. The new one feels better. It's, I don't know, maybe a 15 euro part, so it's not that expensive. If you are in there, change it. Then, against my idea of the whole thing, I came to the conclusion that it was necessary to take out the EGR cooler. Why? Because it was solidly plugged. Like blowing compressed air into it, the air was actually not going through that well. Would always go back because it was so plugged. You couldn't see the light through it. It was solid. Yes. I used the pressure washer. So with a pressure washer and a solid stream nozzle, you blow through there and it gives you 95% done, I'd say. Another thing, this bolt right down here. You can't, wait, give me a second. This bolt right, there's a stud. Yeah, this stud down there. You need to remove the bolt that's on top of it. It's from, it holds down the EGR as well. You need to remove this stud in the front that holds the EGR valve. You also need to remove both of the bolts back there. At first you need to remove the nuts that are on these studs, and then you can remove the studs itself. It's also a T8, E8, so it's an external Torx thing. The same one with the stud in front. You need that. Then I was lazy and I didn't want to drain all my coolant, so I clamped all my coolant hoses. You need to clamp 4 different things. Let me show you. It's this small hose down here. Then it's the bigger hose that goes to the cooling pump, so it's the main pressure coming from the pump hose that you need to clamp. Then you need to clamp one hose where at the highest point of your system, where the air release valve is, and also one right down there at the bottom. And you need to pull them all away from the EGR cooler to clean it. I recommend putting in a few towels so that the coolant doesn't get anywhere. But in the end, it wouldn't be that bad.
And get some hours in the gym.
Yes. Also, it's quite a struggle to pull these hoses off. Best way I found is you take the hose and you turn it a bit. You try to turn it, and eventually you feel like a cluck. Yeah, I don't know, like a sound. It makes a small sound, and you also feel it. And then you can turn the hose, and once you can turn it, you can slowly wiggle it back. And with that, it's easier. It's still a pain, but it's easier. Getting through all of this, I recommend, if you don't have like a lift so you can access this from the bottom, maybe that's easier. I recommend just like laying on the top of your inverter. Put your belly on there, and you can sort of have two hands to work in there. Also definitely get yourself a light with a magnet on top. This one was like, I don't know, $5 on AliExpress. Other things that I have used. I've used this 12mm automatic ratchet thing to remove the two bolts at the back of where the exhaust pipe goes into the EGR cooler assembly. You need something like this because it's very hard and annoying to reach. Also, reaching the bolt from hell underneath, yeah, you need a whole assortment of different extensions and flexible links to get there. It's a pain, but it's manageable. You can do it. Other things, if you would need to change your coolant pump, it's right there, fairly easy to access now, I think. Yeah.
In the ignition plugs.
Also, yeah, the spark plugs. If you want to change your spark plugs, I'm gonna change my spark plugs. Probably never been changed. 230k on this car. So, gonna do that. And yeah, let's see how the reassembly basically goes. If there's anything coming up, I'm gonna give you an update on that. So, as you can see, the reassembly is now quite complete. I have just retightened the cooling water container, and yeah, everything is all good, I'd say. A few things that I forgot. There is like a bracket where a cable clips in. It's right down here underneath the airbox, and it's located with the lower bolt on the two bolts from the EGR pipe thing that goes to the intake manifold. Yeah, the clips were very annoying to remove in the beginning, and I forgot the plastic piece. So I had the pleasure of taking the intake assembly or intake box out again. Yeah. But otherwise, everything went quite smooth, I'd say. It's nicely routed. Yeah, I'm quite happy, to be honest. I think all the screws are at their correct locations. Put the towel over this. There's a sharp corner right here that You don't see it, but it got me on my arm. Only injury I've really sustained from that whole build was through that fucking corner. You get hooked on it quite a lot when you're doing stuff in there, and yeah, not so nice. Other things, yeah, don't forget to plug in any connectors that you unplugged. What's with you? You are in. Okay. And pipe locations, there are these white dots where there's a clamp where you can push the pipe into. Otherwise, it's reassembly. It's way easier than disassembly, I'd say. You don't need to deal with any of the strange clips that you need to unclip, and yeah, it's okay, I'd say. Don't forget to clip in the grounding for the engine. And are there any other things, any other bolts that you need to watch out for that are a bit easy to forget? I'd say the lower mount for the dipstick. Yeah, you need to tighten that up again. Other than that, yeah, keep in mind you have an aluminum block, and that is a thing, and you can't really yank on those bolts, otherwise you're gonna strip them out. Yeah, it's quite good, I'd say. It was quite easy. There's one more thing, and that's with the intake manifold, so with the one underneath here. When you tighten that, keep in mind that you tighten the outside bolts first, and then you move inwards and apply nice and even pressure. Yeah, but that's really the only thing I have. This hose, if you wonder, the hose that comes from the throttle body assembly, that needs to point to the back. So it's like a bit tilted, and it needs to point to the engine, basically, away from you when you're standing before your vehicle. Another thing, when you tighten the EGR hose, this hose here, when you tighten that, you need to tighten both sides at the same time. Otherwise, your intake manifold is not gonna align to your EGR. There's a little bit of flex in there. You can't push it by hand, but the bolts, they just pull it in place. So I've just reinstalled my cowling, at least the metal drip tray to capture the water that runs down the windshield, and it went fairly smoothly. They are, I think, 12 or 13 bolts, something like that. Let me show them. This one, 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 and this one. If you don't remove this bracket, there's only the one in the front. Then there's this one back there. Move to it. It's a bit rusty, so I sprayed it with oil. And there's one in the back, and one in the front again. These are all the bolts. There are no more for the cowling thing. And it went smoothly. You install it by moving it a bit like this. So put this end in first, and then that. So if you remove this top plastic cover thing, you need to watch out. These things, you need to remove one of them. I picked this one, and it sits in like this, and you wedge a screwdriver here where my pointing finger is, and then you turn it, and then it flips up, because there is the latch. Focus, you fuck. And you put it in there, and it's good. And when you put it back, make sure this rubber lip is above the glass. It needs to go above the glass. You could think about cleaning the glass underneath, but that's not really needed, I'd say. There once was a saying with all these Prius owners: when you reassemble your engine cowling water tray thing, don't fucking forget to plug in this connector. Ask me how I know. Listen to this. This is the sound of pain. And also this is the sound of pain. Don't forget them. So I've just reinstalled this piece and clipped all these pins in. So these clips, you need to push them in or clip them in. Push the cowling a bit. Push the cowling a bit backwards and in, and then you can push on here, and you should feel them all clip in, and they look like this when they are clipped in. So there's also this piece that you need to clip in. I showed you that before. I had a bit of struggle pushing that in, so I just sprayed it with a little bit WD-40, and then you're golden. And that's it. I think this is the finish of my repair video. So I've, since the end of this video right here, driven the car, I would say about 7,000 or 8,000 kilometers on a road trip throughout Europe, especially in Spain. And that has been great. I'm still burning oil at a lower rate though. And what would help is probably a fix with Berryman B12, but that's tricky to get here, at least the high strength stuff. I might do that though, because we still have the problem of the stuck piston rings. So my rings are still stuck, and with that oil is still leaking past here and getting burned, even though the rate at which the oil is now sucked as basically oil vapors or fine mist through the PCV valve into the intake manifold is reduced due to my now unclogged EGR cooler and valve assembly. So oil burn is lower, but still happening because of the low tension piston rings, and that's something you can clearly expect from this repair. The car starts great in cold weather. It's now quite cold here in Europe, and the car sits outside, no problem right there. And yeah, I might try the Berryman B12 fix eventually. Another thing that you can watch is the video up here. It's about my Prius camper conversion I took the road trip in, and I think it's one of the nicest setups probably out there. So if you want to see how to build that and how to basically convert your Prius into a little camper van for about $1,000-ish, give or take, with let's say a week of work, then check out this video right here. I'm gonna have quite a detailed build guide-ish disassembly guide. So yeah, if you like the whole content, leave a thumbs up and have a nice day, I guess. Bye. And maybe leave a sub. Leave a sub down there. Subscribe. Bye.